Did Draymond Green block the Jazz Golden State Warriors deal? He says he did. I kind of doubt it. Next on Locked on Jazz.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
How are you? I am David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Today, Draymond Green says he blocked the deal that would have gotten the Jazz and the Golden State Warriors deal, or is he not talking about? Is he talking about some other deal? We'll find out. We'll check. I kind of doubt it. Zach Lowe of ESPN, who is very good and very smart, says the Jazz need to pick a lane. What does that mean? And what is picking a lane? We'll touch on that. Grant Hill talks on Cooper Flag, some Olympic updates as well. And a Jazz player travels to see another Jazz player. Plus new names on the trade market. Plus who could the Jazz help in cap space? I'm loaded with stuff. Whether I get to all of it or not, we'll find out. But we'll be here again for you tomorrow talking Jazz. I am David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz. It's your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps. Please subscribe, thumbs up us, hit the bell button on YouTube so that you get notified right away. I'd like to get a higher percentage of our listeners on YouTube to be subscribers. Last time I checked, we're at about 54%, which is actually really high for us of subscribers. But let's see if we can get that number even higher. That'd be great. I'm all in for that. So let's see. Please subscribe to the show and do that. It would be great to have you aboard in that note. Let's see. What is our latest subscriber status? 52, actually down to 48%. Let's get it over 50%. That was for the last 7 days, 48% subscribers. So let's get it above. See if we can get it above that for the next period of time. All right. And to the everydayers, you're the best. Thank you so much for making Locked On a part of your day every single day, Monday through Friday. We're here for you. All right. Let's get right to it. What do we think of this? Is it possible that one Draymond Green has decided to be the one? Let's see, playing audio, also share tab audio. This gets a little tricky. I have struggled with this in the past, the ability to get the audio from, let's see, to get the audio to play. Let's see if this will work. Let's see if you guys have this. All right. Are we ready? Here it goes.
Like, we was just about to make some trades last week. And I told them straight up, like, yo, that trade helped me. Like, it'll help me right now in my career these last couple of years and stuff. But I've always spoke to y'all from a place of what's best for this organization. I won't stop now. Yeah. That's a bad trade. Like, don't do that trade. Like, I disagree with it. Although it's going to help me right now. Yeah. And so what Clay just did
All right, so let's discuss this for a second. Did Draymond Green really tell the Golden State Warriors to not make a deal right now because that's a bad trade? And is it the trade that involves Lauri Markkanen? So it would help me right now, but it's a bad trade. First of all, Draymond, if the Warriors are relying on you for personnel decisions, I want all their draft picks. When teams start relying on players, and frankly, sometimes coaches, for their personnel decisions, it's a great time to go get their draft picks because it's a bad sign. Second thing, if the Jazz trade involves Lauri Markkanen, if the trade the Warriors are talking about involves Lauri Markkanen, it's not a bad trade. Getting a 7'1" guy who shoots 7 threes a game at 40% and can play in the post and play off the bounce and defend and play 3 different positions, and it's not a bad trade for you or the Warriors. So he's not specific in what trade he's talking about. And Draymond has a tendency to grandstand and make himself sound more important than many others. But it sure feels as though he's probably talking a little bit about the Warriors and the Jazz and all the rumored deals there. Could be the Paul George deal where they had to give up Jonathan Kuminga to get Paul George. Could be some deal we don't know about, a Brandon Ingram deal, which might have been a bad deal. Though Brandon Ingram seems to be undervalued right now, not overvalued. But so the facts are, did Draymond Green really tell the Warriors to block a trade because it's a bad deal for them and it would help him right now? Maybe. Maybe. Is it the Lauri Markkanen deal? Feels pretty unlikely to me on that. In the sense that, one, Lauri Markkanen is so good that Draymond Green's not looking at the Lauri Markkanen trade saying, okay, that would be a good deal for me, but it wouldn't be a good deal for the franchise. He's looking at the Lauri Markkanen deal and thinking, wait a sec, I got Steph Curry, I got Lauri Markkanen, we got a chance. The only other way to think about that is that Draymond Green and Steph Curry have decided to throw in the towel and that they're willing to just roll for the next 2 or 3 years, cash their checks, and not try to compete for a championship, and there's zero chance of that. These guys still think they've got it. They still think they're great enough. They still think they can carry the mail all the way to the top of the hill if they get the right pieces around them. And there's no better piece that's going to be available or going to bring them something than that of Lauri Markkanen. So Draymond Green may be telling the truth that the Warriors came to him on a deal. He said, that's a bad deal. It would help me right now, but don't do it. But it's not the Lauri Markkanen deal. Because if you're Draymond Green and you still have the competitive fire, and you're Steph Curry and you still have the competitive fire, and you have a chance to play with one of the top 25 players in the NBA and add them to your roster, you believe you're a top 4 team in the West and have a chance to win it if that comes together, and you're taking that deal. I promise. So did Draymond Green block the Utah Jazz Golden State Warriors deal? No. Did Draymond Green possibly suggest that they not do a deal they were probably not going to do anyway? Yes, that's highly possible. But there's no part of me that believes that Draymond Green went to the Golden State Warriors and said Brendan Podziemski and Jonathan Kuminga could be so good 6 years from now that I don't want a top 25 player in the NBA on my roster right now. Zero chance of that, at least in my opinion. Because Draymond Green still believes, and so I'm sure Steph Curry still believes, that they can make the deals, that they can get good enough, that they can win games. So, did Draymond Green block the Golden State Warriors Utah Jazz deal? No. Sure made it sound like it though. But he may have been. But is he telling the truth? Yeah, probably. Who is that deal? I don't know. I don't know what that deal is. And I would kind of guess, by the way, that the Warriors bring deals to Draymond at a late stage. Either, hey, we had this opportunity, we didn't do it, or by the way, we're going to do this deal and you need to know. But I'd be really surprised with the history of Draymond that the Warriors trust and believe in him enough. He's a basketball savant, I will say that they're saying to him, should we make this deal? I would believe Steph might have that clout, but I could be wrong. So, fun and a great quote, and Draymond being Draymond. But when you dig into the reality of that one, I got to say, little to no chance it's the Lauri Markkanen deal, because Lauri Markkanen's too good for Draymond to say no to. In fact, I'd be surprised if Draymond or Steph gets asked if they suddenly aren't willing to go, hey, Brendan Podziemski's pretty good, but Jonathan Kuminga might be good. But yeah, no, we'll take Lauri. You bet. We'll take Lauri. A Jazz player and another Jazz player reunite in the offseason, and the Jazz are told to pick a lane. What does that mean? It's next on Locked on Jazz. Today's edition of Locked on Jazz is brought to you by Murdoch Hyundai, located in Logan, Linden, and Murray, 4646 South State Street. The Hyundai lineup of cars, it's just amazing. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with the electric vehicles that have won every award, the Ioniq 5 and the Ioniq 6, which I own the Ioniq 5, and it's just fabulous? Do you want to start with the brand new Santa Fe that looks incredible with I'm driving the Palisade right now, and the new Santa Fe is the envy of all drivers, looking totally sweet with the redesign. Or do you want to start with the 2024 Tucson, which you can get up to $4,000 off on right now, or the 2024 Tucson SEL, where you get $3,003 off as well, or the Palisade that I'm driving right now, the limited, you get $3,000 off. Great deals all going on at Murdoch Hyundai right now. Stop by at 4646 South State Street or in Logan or in Linden. If you're going to stop by, though, please email me first so we can give you the VIP treatment that you deserve at Locked On. Email me at dlock09@gmail.com. That's dlock09@gmail.com. And let me know which location you're going to. We'll set you up with your VIP meeting, so taken care of the minute you arrive, and you get all the special treatment that you deserve by being a Locked On every day. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. The summer is here. Concerts, MLB games, WNBA games, whatever it is you might be going to. If you're traveling to some high-profile event, make sure you get the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app now. Create an account and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account and redeem Locked On NBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for your first purchase. You get $20 off. Flash deals, exclusive in-app deals, select seats to games, zone deals. You can pick the area you want to sit in, get the best price. All-in pricing, toggle that feature on so you know exactly what you're getting, no surprises. Seat views to make sure you're not obstructed or you like where you are, plus the lowest price guarantee. It's all at Game Time. It's what's make Game Time the app for you to use when you're going to see a ball game, share a friend, share a memory with a friend, whatever it might be. Go get Game Time today. Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting platforms. For your second listen today, make sure you jump on Locked On NBA. We have no offseason on Locked On NBA. They'll be there for you 30 minutes every single day. Probably talking about all the big games today. As of right now, Spain knocked off Greece. Giannis is not going to make it to the medal round. They've lost their first two. Canada and Australia are underway right now at the Olympics. I don't want to ruin it for you, but I don't think you're going to be watching that whole game tonight. So we'll see. I do not have the score on that game. I was going to try to find it for you, but ESPN makes the Olympic scores hard to find. And really, you don't want me to give you the score of that game because it, A, won't be that score when you listen. And we'll see. Looks like that one's done, actually. Canada has beat Australia 93-83. Canada's good. RJ Barrett had 24. Josh Giddey had 19. He's playing really well in the Olympics right now. Looks like it was a good game. Canada pulled away at the end. All right. Zach Lowe, this is really like a headliner topic. I should probably be doing this as a whole show. And maybe we'll get into it tomorrow a little bit more. Zach Lowe says the Jazz need to pick a lane. And a lot of Jazz fans say the Jazz need to pick a lane. But I'm not entirely sure what everybody means by that other than one thing. So when I hear someone say pick a lane, and I want to know, give me a comment if I'm wrong on this. What I hear everyone just saying is tank. Because right now the Jazz have kind of picked a lane. They have Lauri Markkanen. They're drafting young players. They're trying to be in a position where if they can get another big player like a Mikal Bridges, a Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, all the ones they've gone after, that they're able to add pieces to a puzzle that already has pieces, but add parts to a foundation that already exists so that they can win faster. Danny Ainge made the comment in the press conference that what he doesn't want to do is be in a position where they go get their next big player, and then they're still so thin that they're still 3, 4, 5 years away from winning with that player. And particularly with all players on 2 or 3 year contracts, that he wants to avoid that. But that's a lane, isn't it? So when I hear everyone say the Jazz need to pick a lane, isn't it what they're really just saying that they need to tank? That's a totally legitimate question. Because to some extent, it seems to me that the Jazz have picked the lane. They traded Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, Bojan Bogdanovic, Royce O'Neal, and then they traded Mike Conley shortly thereafter. And they picked and they moved. The only, and then they acquired Lowry Markkanen, Walker Kessler, Ochai Agbaji. And they've continued to maintain assets that they think are going to be valuable for them in the future. The biggest noticeable move that they made was that they decided that they weren't going to re-sign Kelly Olynyk and that they did not think Ochai Agbaji was part of the future. So they garnered a late first-round draft pick, which turned out to be Isaiah Collier for Ochai Agbaji. That will be very interesting to see of who has a better NBA career, Isaiah Collier or Ochai Agbaji. You can evaluate whether that was the right move. But frankly, the moves they've been making have been pretty consistent. That they're trying to build for the future. They're trying to win a championship. And they are trying to do it right now in a manner so by which, if they were able to still acquire another talent with the amount of draft picks and things that they have, that they wouldn't be starting from scratch. And so when I hear someone say, pick a lane, you can't, the only lane I think you can choose is tanking. Because if your other lanes, well, we're going to go be good now, you got to be able to go acquire talent. And they haven't been able, despite the efforts, they haven't been able to do that. Now, maybe Anthony Simons is available and Jeremy Grant's available and Brandon Ingram's available. And maybe the Jazz are going to piece three of these together. And suddenly you've got Anthony Simons as your point guard and Lowry Markkanen and Brandon Ingram. And you've picked a lane and you're trying to be good. And maybe you're not good enough. The thing that's interesting to me about roster building, and this is probably a longer show we should do for tomorrow, rather than having this kind of as an individual segment, is all of this seems to be kind of a game to see until you get the guy. Right? Like you're just trying to get the guy. And the Jazz got kind of close with Lowry, but like he's not the guy yet. Oklahoma City's hit because they got the guy in Shea. You know, we can all say, well, Oklahoma City did a great job of picking a lane. But if Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is the 25th best player in the NBA instead of the 5th best player in the NBA, that lane doesn't look nearly as good. Right? They picked a lane. Boston, with Danny Ainge, picked a lane, I guess, and they got the 3rd pick of the draft from Brooklyn when Brooklyn went into a disaster, and they got Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum turned out to be one of the 10 best players in the NBA. That's what it's about. Did Denver pick a lane? No, they got Jokic in the 2nd round. Did Dallas pick a lane? I mean, they got Luka with the 3rd pick of the draft. But I talked about this when I was at Summer League. Like Dallas never lost more than 30 games for 1 year. They had 1 year where they lost 24 games. I mean, one less than 30 games. So I don't think they picked a lane. Milwaukee didn't pick a lane. They just got Giannis at 16. So I don't entirely sure I understand what picking a lane is or what is the most beneficial lane to pick. Sacramento picked a lane. Sacramento picked a lane in 2008-9 when they won 17 games. And they won 40 again in 2022-23. The Detroit Pistons seem to have picked a lane. The Detroit Pistons picked a lane in 2019. And they haven't won more than 23 games in a year since. And I don't think they're going to this year either. God only knows what the Washington Wizards did. Did they pick a lane? Maybe they didn't pick a lane. Maybe that's what we're all scared of. The Washington Wizards picked a lane in 2008, 2009 when they won 19 games. And they've never won more than 50 since. They haven't won 50 games in a season since 1978-79. So I don't really understand what picking a lane is other than tanking. It's kind of like code. We're pretty good at code in politics these days. maybe this is, we like to pretend we're saying deep, insightful things that are really not that deep, insightful. And maybe that's pick a lane is code for tank. Because the other pick a lane is be reasonable and competitive and play important minutes until you can find the piece. But all this is about finding the piece. And then part 2 of that would be, in this conversation, would be the Jazz trade deadline moves last year and the year before are pretty clear lane picks. So maybe it's you just want that lane picked earlier. Legit. And wanting us to just tank may be legit. But there doesn't seem to be any indicator at all that the Jazz are about to trade Lauri Markkanen just so that they can lose 45, 55, 60 games. So maybe that's the lane you want. But that doesn't seem to be. Instead, the lane the Jazz seem to be picking is, hey, we got a really good player. We're going to be able to have some reasonable minutes. And frankly, we'll see what they do. But I've talked about it a lot. Like watching Keontae without Jordan and without Lauri last year was hard. And I have a hard time believing that's the way you're going to develop talent. Now, there's a flip side we just haven't talked about. You could decide you don't believe in Keontae, you don't believe in Taylor, you don't believe in Cody, you don't believe in any of our pieces, and we're at 0, and then maybe you do have to pick that lane. I'm not sure I'm willing to go there. Who could the Jazz help with their cap space that they're holding on to so dearly? And Grant Hill on Cooper Flack next on Locked on Jazz. Thanks so much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. To the everydayers, you're the best. Thank you very much. It is Locked on Jazz. Your team every day. You flip on, you know what we're talking about. We're talking Jazz. Nothing else. Jazz all the time. You want your Utah Jazz? Come right here to Locked on Jazz. All right. We've heard a lot about cap space. And one of the big story yesterday, if you didn't catch the show, feel free to go back, was all the talk about the Jazz in the weekend because we were kind of the most talked about team in the league. And the question was, what are the Jazz doing with their cap space? And right now, the Jazz have told teams that they are not taking in player salary into their cap space right now. So the Jazz are going to see if they get the extension done and then what they can do. And maybe they're about to add a Anthony Simons or Jeremy Grant or Nikola Vucevic or somebody else to Lauri Markkanen and try to be good. Who knows? It's unclear what the Jazz are trying to do with that open cap space. If the Jazz were to use that cap space in a manner that is to relieve someone for the luxury tax or an apron or something of that nature, there are currently 10 teams who are over the luxury tax who the Jazz could get out of the luxury tax. And that's a pretty valuable thing because if you get out from under the luxury tax, then you get the revenue share from all the other teams, whereas if you're paying the tax, you don't get the revenue share. So it's not only a question of saving the money you would save by being in the tax, but it's a question of you also getting a bunch of revenue share, which can be 10 to 15 to 20 million dollars, depending on what it is, how much the tax is. So it can be a lot. So some of these, I think these teams can just kind of get out all by themselves. Atlanta's got $700,000 over the luxury tax. They can cut one player and probably get there. Or drop, just do, that's the one's pretty simple. New Orleans is 1.4 million over the luxury tax. They could probably solve that in the Brandon Ingram trade. Cleveland's $2.1 million over the luxury tax. They might be able to solve that. That also gets interesting on what they do with Isaac Okoro. And if they let him go, and as I've talked about, Isaac Okoro is a player that I would really like for the Jazz to get because of what he does defensively. But it also means that Cleveland's got $2.1 million sitting there on somebody's deal. And, you know, there's a guy on their roster named Craig Porter, who's actually this year, Sam Merrill, ironically enough, is at 2.1 and Ty Jerome's at 2.5. So the Jazz could take Ty Jerome for a second-round draft pick and Cleveland gets out from under. Okay, that's the kind of simple deal. I don't think you're getting, for $2.4 million, I don't think you're getting much more than a second-round pick. The New York Knicks are $2.4 million over. Keita Bates-Diop is at $2.6 million. Another one. Jazz could take Keita Bates-Diop, probably get a second-round pick for that. Probably not a lot more, but you could get something. The LA Clippers are $2.5 million over the luxury tax. Kobe Brown is at 2.5. Amir Coffey, who's not actually a bad player, is at 3.9. Bones Highland is at 4.1. You might be able to get a little bit more for that, depending. They don't have a lot of cap space, but you might be able to get a protected pick. I doubt it, but maybe. Dallas is at $3.4 million right now. And over the space, which Dwight Powell happens to be right at $4 million, gets him out from under the luxury tax. The Golden State Warriors happen to be at $5.8 million. So do the Jazz make a trade involving all the players that we've been talking about that actually then suddenly involves them being able to get out from under the Jazz, add another piece or two, and somehow the Warriors can get out from their $5.8 million. Kevon Looney is at $8 million. Moses Moody is at 5.8, and Jonathan Kuminga is at $7 million. Interestingly enough, but they would obviously take things in. Philadelphia, the 76ers are at $6.5 million over the luxury tax. Kenyon Martin Jr., who they signed, and I think they want to keep, is at 7.9. So is Kelly Oubre. So you would have to piece together some things, and I don't really know on their roster how they could do it, frankly, because they have $51 million under Embiid, $49 million under Paul George, $35 million for Tyrese Maxey, and then their next 5 players are Caleb Martin, Kelly Oubre, Kenyon Martin Jr., Andre Drummond, Jared McCain, Eric Gordon, Reggie Jackson, and Kyle Lowry, all players they plan to play, all players that are making money. So I don't know how they get under it. Denver's really interesting. Denver's $11 million, $11.8 million. And I don't know who the 2 players are, but Zeke Najee's at $8.8 million. And I'm sure they would love to move Zeke Naji, and they might give up a first-round draft for that because Denver is luxury tax averse. And the Jazz could just take him into it. I think the Jazz have a $12 million luxury tax or trade exception. If I remember correctly, the Jazz could take the that they might be able to take him into, if I remember that correctly, but there's something of that sort. And I think the Jazz could take that trade. That would free them $9 million. That might get the Jazz a first-round pick. Denver's 2025 pick has some protections. 2026 pick has some protections on it. I don't know how far out you're willing to go, but maybe you take their 20. We have 3 picks already in 2025, so you'd write their 2026, but it doesn't work. And maybe you take their 2027 with some protections, but the Denver has a bunch of picks that are out with protections. I don't know entirely how it works, but that one's interesting to watch because that would be a lot of the Jazz cap space and what they might be able to do with it. So keep an eye on that. The last one is Miami's at 13.9. That would earn you a first-round pick. Might be more than we have available. Grant Hill on Cooper Flag. I think he's great. He'll be a great college player. I think his game may even resonate and translate better on the NBA stage. He's young. He has all the sorts of tools. He's got the mental makeup. He's got some nasty to him. He isn't afraid. So a high praise from Grant Hill on Cooper Flag. Tomorrow, a little bit more on Pick a Lane. And should we be at all concerned on how little Taylor Hendricks played? Go back through the last 10, 15 years of NBA. Are there other first-round picks, top 20 picks who played this little and still had a good NBA career? We'll look at it tomorrow on Locked On Jazz. Right now, over to the first ever 24/7 national sports channel, Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. If you're on audio, check out the Big 6 in 60, the 6 biggest stories in 60 minutes.